Hi, I'm Hina Siddiqui, and you are listening to the Corporate Life Podcast. We are in season 3, where every life is a movie and you are the star of yours. So step into the spotlight, the world is watching. Some people walk into a room and instantly take all the attention. They are not loud, they don't chase it, but there is something about them. Something subtle, magnetic, undeniable. We call it charisma. Do you know someone like that? I'm sure you do. And today we are going deep into what that something actually is. Because here's the truth, it's not magic, it's not luck, it's a skill and it can be learned. My guest today is Richard Reid, a behavioral psychologist, charisma coach, and the author of Charisma Unlocked. By the way, I have never had a charisma coach on this show before, so this is a first. And this conversation is going to be absolutely charismatic. We are unpacking the real psychology behind being unforgettable, even if you're shy, introvert, or tired of feeling invisible. This is not about faking it, this is about becoming more you with presence, clarity, and quiet power. Let's get into it. Richard, let's begin with your own story of charisma. Were you always charismatic or you had to build this charisma?
That's a matter of opinion, but I think it's something that comes with time and confidence. And for me, the biggest thing about charisma is we tend to think about it as being a one size fits all, but it's actually about recognizing who you are and being confident in that and leaning into it. And I think so often we only show people the parts of ourselves that we think fit with everybody else. For me, that's something that comes with time and experience.
So, how were you as a child? Were you a charmer? Because I know that a lot of people are naturally charmers, right? They are naturally charismatic, and some people have to work on that. Like I had to work on myself a lot. I don't know what score would you give me on that, but then whatever I have developed, I had to build it on. I was a very shy person. So, how were you as a kid?
Pretty much the same. So very shy until you got to know me, and I think some of that still is the case today. So I would regard myself as an introvert. So I can be very good with people, but actually my preference is time on my own. And I know when I need to withdraw in order to
Yeah.
recharge. So I think that's kind of who I am at the heart of it. But I think inevitably, in any walk of life, if you want to be connected, if you want to advance your career and open opportunities for yourself, you've got to be able to be competent and comfortable in social settings. So it's something that's really sort of come with time by putting myself in lots of different situations and also realizing, in terms of my aspirations, whatever those might be, career, life in general, it is about connecting with people. So you've got to come out of that comfort zone in some respects.
Yeah, right. It's just about the energy, right? That the people gauge whenever you enter a room and you don't even speak a word, and people can just gauge, they can just sense your energy.
Yeah.
And this is what we call charisma. How do you
Yeah.
define charisma? Like, what's your definition of charismatic person?
Yeah, so I think it is about energy. We tend to think about charisma as being about high energy, and often it is, but not always. And I think we need to be emotionally intelligent if we're going to be charismatic. We need to understand what is the emotion that the situation requires. So sometimes it might be high energy to motivate people. Other times it might be people are low energy, and I speak in this regard as a therapist. That actually sometimes I need to meet people where they're at.
Yeah,
So if somebody's low energy and suddenly I'm high energy, there's going to be a very obvious mismatch and it may make people feel uncomfortable. So sometimes you've got to meet them where they are.
balance
And
it.
then
Mm.
absolutely, and sometimes then you might gradually lead them out of that in order to change the mood. And I think this is one of the things that we often lose sight of when we're in any kind of meeting. Whatever we're doing in some form or another, we're often selling. So we're selling ideas, we're selling products, whatever it might be. So we have to think, what is the energy that I need to generate in this situation in order to influence people to behave in the way that I want them to behave? So ideally, we want to do that in a way which is genuine and authentic, but we need to think about what's the energy. It's not just about delivering the words.
Yeah.
If a message falls flat because it hasn't resonated with somebody, they're not going to be inspired to act on the message that we're trying to deliver. They're not going to be interested in the services that we're trying to promote. So energy is key in all of this. But also, if somebody is sort of an introvert, if we're very extroverted, sometimes that can be great. But there is a risk that sometimes we can overshadow people. So people feel as though they're in some way falling short. They're less inclined to share. They'll feel like there's less space in the conversation. And often with introverts, they need to process things internally before they express them. Whereas with extroverts, they're often thinking as they talk.
Yeah.
So again, we've got to be mindful of the people that we're with and what is going to bring the best out of them. So they're going to come away from situations not just thinking that we're wonderful, but also feeling that actually they've been seen and heard and met as well.
Yeah. So is the confidence and charisma the same thing, or or a person can have one more than the other?
Interesting question. I would say you can be confident without being charismatic. So charisma is really about that intersection between who you are and the other person. So it's what do you create between you? You can be confident without necessarily connecting with somebody else or inspiring them in some form. So definitely confidence is part of the foundation of charisma, but you need to have more than that to be regarded as charismatic.
So what is the biggest misunderstanding people have about charisma? What do you think?
Yeah, so good question. So a few things really, but I think the first thing is people tend to think that to be charismatic, you've got to be the life and soul of the party. You've got to be the loudest person in the room. Sometimes that's the case, but not entirely. So some of the most charismatic people that I've met are quiet people, introverted people, and they might not be the people who hold court at a party, but they are the people, they still have a presence in a room. And when people are talking with them, people feel fully met, fully heard, fully understood. I think, a classic example of this would be someone like Barack Obama, who actually, by his own admission, is an introvert. He can be up there on the stage and be fantastic and impactful, but actually he needs to withdraw from that to recharge. So he's a quiet, confident form of charisma. So that's the first thing I would say. I think the second thing I would say is that charisma is not the same as charm. A lot of people think that it is. So charm, it's semantics, but charm for me is really about telling people what I think they want to hear in order to get the outcome that I want to get. And there is some connection there with charisma. But for me, charisma is really about being authentic. It's about trying to create win-win situations. It's not about just trying to charm you to get what I want. It's about creating, hopefully, longer-term, more sustainable relationships. Whereas charm is really about getting what you need in that moment, not necessarily thinking about what the other person needs or thinking about what the long-term consequences are for that relationship. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing that I would say is that a lot of people think charisma is purely about outward behaviours. And that's part of it. So body language, voice, all of those sort of things are important. But it all starts with how you manage your internal world.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
Absolutely. It's good to hear. So I think, it's about how you recognise and manage your own emotions so that you are able to then use those outward mannerisms in a way which is congruent and which is deliberate and purposeful. And when we're not in command of our emotions, we jump in, we interrupt people, we close people down, our hands are all over the place because we're not in command of those emotions. So it starts with having that sort of solid internal base to then build from. That's the third thing. And then the final thing, I think, is really around this idea that charisma comes in, as we've already touched on, really. It's this idea that charisma comes in lots of shapes and forms. Yeah. Yeah. And actually, it's not always, as part of that, it's not about everybody being the same who's charismatic, but it's also about not everybody who's charismatic is necessarily likable. Yeah. There is often an overlap, but not always. And sometimes there can be people who are regarded as being very charismatic that we don't actually like. But the important thing is, we know what they stand for. And when we're talking about them to other people, we're able to very quickly present those people almost as a brand. So we can list a series of characteristics or behaviours that we associate with that person. And this is really important that, it's like the old adage goes, it's better to be spoken about than not spoken about at all. And so sometimes, ideally, we want people to like us, but if people are talking about us in a negative way, it's still potentially an indication that we have charisma.
Yeah. And I love that when you said that it's about the inner world more than that. We can try very hard to impress somebody or people, but that is not something like that would not come across as what people would like or about us or something. Absolutely. Like it would just be very natural to see that this person is trying hard. So it's all about being effortless, where you are so comfortable in your own skin that you don't care about what others think. And it's most about self-worth also, I guess. Like the more you think high of yourself, the kind of self-image you have, the more charisma you would have around.
I think so, and I think it's a delicate balance, isn't it? Because there's a fine line between being confident and being arrogant. And arrogant
Mhm.
is an inflated sense of
Yeah.
yourself, and it often involves regarding ourselves as being more important than the other person. And I
Yeah.
think this is an important aspect of charisma. There's so many different facets to it. It's also about humility. So I can value myself, but also regard myself as being equal to other people, not more important than other people.
Yes, of
And I think that's
course.
really important in terms of these
Yeah.
building these sustainable relationships.
Yeah. It's like somebody I was talking to recently on my podcast, and this person said that nobody is less than me and inferior to me, and I am not inferior. Like we are just equal. So this kind of
Absolutely.
stuff, when you are not putting people on a pedestal and you are seeing yourself as equal, so that is also like kind of charismatic, like it's a very attractive kind of quality in people.
Absolutely. And if you think about some of the people who you or I or other people might regard as being charismatic, not only do they tend to have that sense of humility, they might be very accomplished, but they still have that humility and genuine interest in other people. But also they own their life story. So not only do they own their quirks and their individuality, but they own
Hmm.
their life story. So if you think about it, we often have a tendency to only show people the perfect aspects of ourselves. Yeah, and we give them kind of the abridged version of our life that only shows the positive elements. But often the people who go the furthest in life are people who've overcome great adversity and setbacks. And a lot of the people who we regard as charismatic incorporate that stuff within their story. So, they're very open about talking about those things, but they don't do it from the perspective of being a victim of those things. They talk about what they've done to overcome those situations, how it's developed them, or what it is that they're doing to overcome those things. And I think that is very inspiring for the people, because everybody has difficulties and battles. And when we see people who've overcome those things and they're open about that, that also creates a sense of psychological safety. We gravitate towards them because we think these people understand what life is like for me, and they've got an idea about how to overcome these types of difficulties.
And how important is it to have charisma in today's world where it's more of social media, more online branding, and personal branding is also important? And then the world is so competitive than
Yeah.
before. Like when I was growing up in India, I did not see that was so much competitive market or something like that. So now I see that there's a lots of competition. People want to be better than the others, and so charisma is much more important today. What do you think about that?
I think that's true. I think as I said before, I think increasingly it's always been the case, but increasingly I think even people in professional services, you're selling things.
Mm.
You're selling
Yeah.
yourself. You're selling your services. So people have to have something that makes them memorable. And I think a lot of people when I say, well, surely being good at your job is the most important thing. And I'm absolutely not negating that at all. I think you have to have competence to back it up, otherwise you get found out very
Mm.
quickly. So you have to have the competence, and that's almost the given. It's what do you have beyond that, because other people will be competent as well.
Yeah.
So it's that memorable edge. And again, it's this idea of building a brand that when people come away from speaking with you, they feel good about themselves in an
Mm.
authentic way. It's not a case of flattering people. They feel that they've been seen and heard and
Mm.
valued, but they have a very clear view of who you are that
Yes.
they can then go away and talk to other people about. And
Yeah.
it's this consistency of brand which is really important. If you're somebody who's different depending on the day that I meet you, then actually that doesn't create that sense of consistency. It's a bit
Yeah.
like every time you go to the supermarket buying a packet of cornflakes, and it's different every time you buy it. We don't have confidence in that as a brand.
Yeah.
Whereas if I go every time and I know pretty much what I'm getting, I can shorthand that and describe that to other people very easily because it's
Hmm.
more memorable. And it's exactly the same with people.
Yeah. And I believe it's also about how we make other people feel around us.
Yeah.
That is also the kind of charisma, because
Yeah.
people like us when we make them feel something about them, right? So this is also important. It's just not about we dressing up nicely or we saying nice things and having nice body language. It's also about how we connect with people, as you said in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you think about it, as human beings, we tend to sort of have an inflated sense of ourselves. We're essentially sophisticated animals, and the way that we experience the world first and foremost is not intellect, it's emotions and physicality.
Yeah.
And all the time when we are interacting with people, It's not just that we're registering people on a conscious level. There's lots of things that we're doing on an unconscious level. How safe am I with this person? How much do I trust this person? How much does this person respect me?
Yeah.
All these kinds of things that give us a felt sense of
Right.
where we stand with somebody. So absolutely, how we make somebody feel is really, really important. And you can have two people delivering exactly the same message with the same wording, but one person will have more of an impact because of how they've made people feel. And this operates on a multitude of levels. So this is not just what we say; it's the timing of it, the pace of it, the tone of it, the body language that goes with it, how much opportunity we give other people to intercede when we're speaking. All of these things give subtle and less subtle indications of where we are in relation to people, and ultimately how they feel and how memorable they are and what they do with the information that we give them.
Yeah. Richard, for a person who feels invisible in a room, where do they start?
Yeah, so if that's you, I think some of the things that I talk about in my workshops and coaching, some of that might be a long way down the road, and so to try and make extreme changes overnight is going to be very anxiety inducing for people. So what I say to people is make small incremental changes, do small things, do them repeatedly if need be, until they become comfortable. And what you want to be doing really is just going slightly outside of your comfort zone. So, for example, it might be that when you're interacting with somebody, you take these small calculated risks. You share something about yourself you might not ordinarily share.
Yeah.
So an opinion that might be slightly different, or a story that might be more than you would ordinarily share, albeit appropriate to the situation. The other things that you can do that actually can be helpful are to think about how you enter those interactions in terms of your mindset. A lot of time when we talk with people, particularly if it's something we're not comfortable with, we tend to see it as performance. And we think, how am I coming across?
Yeah.
What do I say next to be entertaining? But actually, one of the ways that we can very readily connect with people is to ask questions about them. And the kind of questions we want to be asking are what we call open-ended questions. So what was that like? How was that? What was it about that appealed to you? And provided at some point we also share something about ourselves, it opens the conversation up. It means the other person is actually doing more of the work than we are, and it eases us into the conversation. And the reason why we ask those open-ended questions is because it allows the person to take the question and the answer in whatever direction feels appropriate to them. Whereas if I say to someone, did you like football? It's a yes or no response, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless they particularly want to expand on that. And if it's not something like, I've suddenly got to reinvent the wheel and come up with another question.
Yeah. Open-ended questions like ask.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So people then give you an indication of what's important to them. But more importantly, even if they're not explicit about it, they will give you indications about the emotions that go alongside their opinions. And it's really when we start to get into those emotions that we connect with people in the stronger sense that we regard as part of charisma.
Yeah.
So if I tell you how I feel about the holiday I went on, then actually I'm doing something that's connecting with me on an emotional level. It's helping your understanding, but if you're eliciting that in the conversation, you're also making that person re-experience those feelings. So that, again, that makes your conversation with them more memorable and probably very different to most of the conversations that they have.
Yeah, this is a very valuable advice. It's just that you be focused on the other person and you forget about yourself. Because when you keep thinking about how am I coming across, how am I talking, how am I being judged or not, then I think if my focus is entirely on me, then I'm more overthinking. But if my focus is on the other person, it's more attractive for the other person also.
Absolutely. If you are thinking about yourself, or even if you're thinking about what am I going to say next, you're not fully present in the conversation, and to some degree that will come across. And actually, when we overthink how we're coming across to somebody, that's when we start to do all kinds of weird and wonderful things that aren't part of how we naturally behave.
Yeah,
we become more sort of more extreme in terms of the behaviours that we don't want. So focusing on the person is really important. And one of the things that I often say to people is, imagine the person you're talking with is a guest at your house. If they're a guest at your house, you will be doing certain things to make them feel comfortable. And this particularly applies if you're at a networking event, for example. If you ask somebody about their journey, how was it? If you get them a drink, you're subtly making them feel more comfortable. Also, in a way, generating more authority and gravitas within that situation.
Yeah.
Because you're effectively saying, I belong here and I'm welcoming you into that space.
Right. Right. This is beautiful. You say that charisma is a skill. So can you please break that down and what are the actual components people can work on, like if we just divide them into different parts?
Sure. So I think the first thing really is about building your self-awareness. So this is two aspects really. One is, how do I feel in any given situation? And so how am I feeling when I'm going into a situation? How am I feeling before I go into a situation? When we're aware of our feelings, we've got more opportunity to manage them if we need to, or to channel them according to what's appropriate for the situation. And a lot of the time, if we're angry or we're stressed, because we don't register that, or we don't do anything with it, it then plays out into how we conduct our conversation. So being aware of that is really, really important in terms of giving you an opportunity to get more control over it. So that's the first thing. The other aspect of self-awareness is really around developing your brand. And, we all have some view of who we are and what we're like, but it's interesting that often that is removed from how other people perceive us. And if you're feeling really brave with this stuff, it can be quite helpful to get feedback from people that you know.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can be quite brutal. Sometimes it can actually be reaffirming. But when you get a sense of how people perceive you, honest feedback from people, as scary as it is, that accelerates your self-awareness. So in other words, where are the areas that maybe I need to develop? But equally, where are the areas that I do really well that I can work on actually making a more consistent part of my proposition? So self-awareness is the first part. And when you've got that self-awareness, you can then start to not only develop your brand, so you're more consistent in situations, but also if you start to deviate from that brand. So say, for example, somebody rattles you in a conversation. Very easy for your emotions to override your intention within that situation. Whereas if you're aware of your brand, you're more likely to recognize when you're going off track and to recalibrate in real time, rather than coming away from the situation, think, I shouldn't have done that, or I should have done this. You can react and minimize the deviation, so to speak. But the other aspect of that is that you can start to self-regulate as well. When you recognize what you're feeling in any given moment, you have an opportunity there to develop skills to manage your emotions. So, for example, if I'm low energy, it might be I need to raise my energy, or it might be I need to bring my energy down, or it could be I'm anxious or angry. Very, very common that we go from one situation to another, particularly when we're operating over mediums like Zoom and Teams. And because we have very little time in between those situations, we've got emotional leakage. So in other words, I may have had a very difficult conversation with somebody. I've now got to be very present with somebody and make them feel comfortable and make them feel important. If we're not aware of the emotions that we're carrying, that starts to impact on how we come across, even in terms of the pace that we speak at. So being aware of what we're carrying means we can implement some practical tools to manage that, or at the very least, we can be aware of it and try and mitigate against it.
Yeah.
So self-regulation is really important. When you've got those basic foundations in place, it's then that you can start to look at things like your body language, your voice modulation, the structure of your sentences, how you deliver a story, how you register how other people are responding to your message. All these kinds of things are only really effective when you have the spare mental and emotional capacity to register what's going on for other people.
And what do we need to let go of to be more charismatic? There must be some bad habits that we have picked up as a side effect of growing up in this society. So what do we need to let go of?
Yeah, really good question. I think two things come to mind. One is slowing down.
Yeah.
So when we are very fast, not only does that give us less opportunity to think about how we construct our messages, but it also means it's harder for other people, because other people, remember, there's a time lag. Whatever we say, people need to process that. So slowing down gives people more time to process our messages, which means it's more likely to have impact. But it also allows them more opportunity to be engaged in the conversation.
Yeah.
And what you tend to find, particularly when people are anxious, they front load their conversations and say lots at the outset of the conversation, and they make assumptions about the other person's position and what they feel about things. So often sort of introducing the theme and stepping back allows other people to come in, and we can then adapt how we conduct the next part of our message based on their response. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second one is, and this is really difficult. I remember training as a therapist years ago, and one of the exercises that we did was around silence, sitting in silence in conversations. So saying something and then holding the space. And it's really uncomfortable. It's only over the years that that's got more comfortable for me. But that is one of the biggest things that we do. We often think about charisma as being about doing. I need to do this. I need to say that.
Yeah.
That's only part of the story.
Right.
Sometimes it's about knowing when to not say anything.
Yeah.
To allow people to not only reflect on what we've said, but to qualify what they think and feel about something. You think about normal interactions that we have. Most of the time, life is so fast that people hold us to account for the first thing that comes out of our mouth. And a lot of the time, if we're having really sort of important conversations, particularly conversations that in some way touch upon emotions and personal experience, a lot of the time people will have never spoken about those things outwardly before. So in other words, when they're saying something, they are hearing the words for the first time as well.
Yeah.
So sometimes holding back allows them to qualify and say, well, actually, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant.
Yeah.
Before we dive in and say, you said this.
So it's like just being and not doing much is also a part of that.
It is. And if you've ever been in a networking event or a business meeting, think about some of the people you have the most respect for. Often they will have what we call gravitas. In other words, weight.
Yeah.
When they say or do something, it has significance. It's not white noise. It's not kind of just continuation of everything else that they've done. They tend to be more deliberate and purposeful in their actions, in their words, when they speak, when they don't speak. And what it means is because they don't speak all the time, not doing things all the time, people register when they are delivering something. So it means it doesn't dilute the impact of those things because they're not doing lots of random things in between times just for the sake of it to validate their existence.
Yeah.
So that's really important. That silence is also really important. If you're a leader or somebody quite senior, silence is also really useful in terms of allowing more junior people or introverts, people who need more time to reflect on what they think, to come into the conversation. So if you want to be inclusive, if you want to avoid creating an echo chamber, one of the ways in which you can do that is to occasionally just hold back, let somebody else step into the space.
Yeah.
So you're empowering other people as much as you're generating gravitas.
Yeah, that's interesting. And how has charisma helped you in your life, in your relationships, in your life overall?
It's massively important. So many of the situations, in work and my personal life that I've found myself in have been based upon the impact that I've had with people. Even before people have read my CV.
Yeah.
They will get it. They will often get a sense of who I am. And that will be enough to open doors for situations. And obviously, you need to have some substance behind that.
Right.
But having that ability is fantastic in terms of connecting with people, reassuring them, letting them know that you're the right person for that situation. And the confidence follows on from that.
So what are some of the subtle body language cues that make someone instantly more charismatic?
So I think the first thing is the speed that we operate at. And when we are nervous, when we are stressed, when we are busy, we tend to be quite rapid.
Yeah.
With the way we speak, the way we use our hands. And that can be disconcerting for other people. Occasionally, we might want to do it for impact to illustrate a particular point. But generally, if we're doing that a lot, it makes other people feel stressed. They might not register it, but on some level, they will feel more stressed. So what we generally want to be doing, unless there is a particular reason not to, is to be having a more measured approach to how we speak. So that slow, measured approach is really, really important in terms of just relaxing other people.
Yeah.
The other thing that we might want to think about, particularly when it's key messages, is the length of the sentences that we use. And what we tend to do is to use quite long sentences with lots of subclauses. And the danger with that is that we lose sight of what's important and what's not important. And even more so, other people are even less inclined to know what's important. So we really need to use shorter sentences to allow us to bring to bear all the kinds of skills that accentuate our messages. So shorter sentences allow us to draw breath. They allow us to have pauses for effect, to check how our message has been received. It also allows us an opportunity to pick out particular keywords or phrases in the sentence and to use our voice or our body language to really accentuate those. In other words, to say to people, this is the bit you need to be listening to. If you don't listen to anything else, to say, listen to this. So shorter sentences are easier to manipulate for impact. So I think that's really important to say. And then I think the other main thing that I would say is be deliberate in how you use your body. We don't want to be too polished and manufactured. We still want to be true to who we are. But whoever we are, there's always room for improvement. And one simple thing to think about is how you use your hands. So obviously we're in a video at the moment, so it's a little bit more tricky to see my hands. But one thing to think about is what is the kind of energy you want to create in a talk, a meeting, whatever it might be. So things like anger, things like excitement tend to be what we call high energy. And then if somebody's very stressed or angry, we want low energy to try and bring that down, to calm that down. Okay. So one thing to think about is imagine that your hands are holding a helium balloon, the kind of balloon that you get at a party.
Yeah.
Okay. And the balloon represents the energy in the room. So if I want the energy to go up, I want people to feel energized. I want the balloon to go up. If I want people to feel calm, I want the balloon to come down. Notice what I'm doing there. Yeah. So I'm bringing my hands, when I'm pushing the balloon down, my fingers are straight, they're at a slight angle, and my palms are facing downwards. So in other words, I'm pushing the balloon down. So it's effectively saying to people, calm down. We've got this under control.
Yeah.
So this is really important. We know what we're doing with this. And it also helps to inform the pace of our voice when we do this.
I would say here that like body does not lie. Like body languages, of course, we can learn a few body language cues and, the techniques and tricks and stuff. But then it's more about embodying that attitude in ourselves. And
absolutely, it's got to be consistent. If people see you in other walks of life and you're a headless chicken, they're not going to believe it.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, it starts with how you manage your internal world.
Right.
If you're doing this but you're panicking,
exactly,
people aren't going to buy it. Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of how you bring the energy down. If you want the energy to go, in other words, the balloon to release, then you would have palms slightly upwards, fingers slightly bent, and what you tend to do is have your hands further apart. So it's probably a little bit tricky to see my hands on the camera, but it's this is an amazing opportunity. So look what I'm doing. Yeah. So hands are wide, they move a little bit quicker. So these are subtle ways, so long as they're congruent with what we're feeling inside. These are subtle ways of actually encouraging people to raise their energy levels or lower their energy levels accordingly.
Yeah, that's interesting and that's quite valuable. What's one charismatic tip that instantly upgrade how others see people online? For example, it's the age of online branding. Yeah. So most of the times we are on Zoom, we are building our business through online world. So what is that one charisma tip that you would like to give to people?
Well, I think it's about being fully present, and it's surprising how many people don't put their cameras on calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they're on a call and they're doing other things in the background.
Yeah.
So being fully present is really about, it's bringing all of your attention to that person and that meeting. So, having your camera on, not having lots of distractions in the background, but equally thinking about things like your background as well. If you've got a very cluttered background, that detracts from your ability to be charismatic because people are focusing on other things. And some of these things, they seem so basic that, that people think, well, big deal. But actually, they're almost so basic we often forget to do them.
Yeah.
So these are really, really important. So I think that those are the main things I would say. But the other thing I would say is, we spoke a little bit earlier about effectively trying to be more inclusive. How do you bring other people into the conversation? And I think we've got to work even harder at that when we're on a Zoom call or a Teams call or something like that, because it's very easy when you've got a group of people for people to be quiet and to hide away.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that we need to do is to work more actively to bring people into the conversation. So it might be asking somebody a direct question. John, what do you think about that? Or Linda, I know you were talking about this earlier. Do you want to come in at this point? So we're bringing people into the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's important. But equally, how many of these kind of meetings do we have where there is no agenda? Yeah, we know we're there to talk about a particular topic, but nobody's actually outlined the agenda. And again, that means that some people are going to come underprepared. And it particularly applies with introverts. So introverts tend to take a bit more time to process things before they provide some kind of output. So actually particularly for people like that, giving them prior notice of what the topics of the conversation are going to be and the running order is really, really helpful for those people to prepare. Because otherwise what tends to happen is that the conversation moves on before they've had an opportunity to say anything.
Absolutely. Richard, talk a bit about your book, Charisma Unlocked, and why did you write that book, and what all content that you're talking about? Just a glimpse of it, like why should people read that one?
Yeah, so Charisma Unlocked, it's really based upon the last 20 years work that I've done in terms of research and working with clients. So I've worked with sort of lots of clients from people with very serious mental health issues all the way through to sort of high performing C-suite executives. And there's a lot of sort of common elements to the things that people struggle with. So the book is really a culmination of all of that insight and experience over the last 20 years. And it's very easy to access. So you don't necessarily need to read it from cover to cover. You can pick out chapters and pick out sort of nuggets that you can apply very, very easily.
Okay.
And the thing is, a lot of people who the book would appeal to are sort of primarily business people, and they tend to be quite short on time. So this book is really geared towards people who don't have a lot of time, but know they want to up their game. So it gives them very sort of quick, actionable tips that they can apply to their everyday situation, and hopefully reap the benefits of that very, very quickly. So it's very geared towards those people. If you're not a business person, you can still read it and get benefit from it, but it's primarily geared towards those people.
Yeah, because charisma is needed everywhere. It's just not in business. It's in your job, it's in your relationships, it's your friendships, like everywhere, every aspect of your life. Charisma is
Absolutely.
something that adds huge value to your relationships, to your the way you make money, the way you treat people, the way you show up in the world. It's so important in today's world, especially.
Definitely. And, as I say, I work with a lot of accomplished people, and one of the objections that I sometimes hear is, well, what do I need to do? So I'm already doing really well. I'm already very charismatic. And I would say that whoever you are, wherever you are on that continuum, there's always scope for improvement and the opportunity to open up more doors for yourself as a
Yeah.
consequence.
Yeah. So as we are just coming to the close, and I am being curious about this question, I'm just having this in mind right now that there are very rich and famous people who show up as very charismatic people, right? So is it that the charisma that has gotten them there, or because they have become rich and successful, that's why that charisma we can show in their personalities? What do you
Yeah,
think?
it's a really interesting question. I think it's a bit of both. So sometimes success breeds confidence, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess the more successful you become, the more opportunity you have to live in a rarefied world where
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
people defer to you. So I think it definitely plays a part. But it's quite interesting. I've seen a lot of interviews with actors, and it's interesting. A lot of them really struggle when they're not in character. So when they're hiding behind the persona, they're very gregarious or whatever else it might be. But often when it's about them,
Mm.
they're very uncomfortable. They're very sort of shifting in the chair. So it varies enormously. But I think certainly success breeds charisma, but also people are drawn to people who are successful.
Mm.
There's a degree of reassurance and safety in that, and an aspiration in that, isn't it? That even if we don't know these people, being interested in them and being aligned with them, somehow we think that some of that is going to rub off on us.
Yeah.
So it is really important, and I think almost certainly a lot of those people. I'm particularly thinking in terms of sort of the acting fraternity. Almost certainly a lot of those people have got their jobs not just because they're good actors, but also because of the connections that they're able to forge.
Yeah, yeah. And do you think of any person, any famous person who's there, just visible online or maybe in the world, that you think that you'd really admire this person for their charisma? Who's your favorite person?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, but I've got to go with Barack Obama. I just think he's
Obama.
fantastic, and I particularly admire him because, like myself, he's an introvert, and
Me too.
you think about the situations he puts
Yeah,
himself in. They're very public situations, standing in front of hundreds of people, doing interviews to journalists, all this sort of stuff. That's something that he's built over time. And he's an example of somebody who's very, very accomplished, very successful,
mm.
but he's built that over time. He was not that from day one.
Yes.
And actually, if you ever seen an interview with his wife will often say, when we're at home, he'll just go up to the room and he's there on his own,
Yeah, yeah.
reading or writing or whatever he's doing. So somebody who prefers their own company, but he's acknowledged for being somebody who connects with people and brings people together. And I think his speeches are fantastic. His use of voice, his structure of his sentences, his body language. I think he's a masterclass in all of those things.
Yeah, this is interesting. The season 3 that we are doing right now, like this podcast, It's the theme is that every life is a movie and you are the star of yours. So I would say that this is like every life is a movie and charisma can make you a superstar.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it can
Yeah.
also help to reframe your view of your own life. Part
Yes.
of charisma is about the story. It's not about making things up. It's how you frame the things that have happened to you
Yeah.
for yourself and for other people. So, this is part of charisma as well. Are you somebody who overcomes adversity, or are you somebody who's a victim of adversity?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Richard, how can people access your book? What is the easiest way to reach that book and your work?
Yeah, so you can find the book on Amazon. It's also available via my website, and that is www.richard-reid, spelled reid.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn.
Thank you very much for your time. It was
My pleasure.
really, really interesting conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it and learned a lot from you.
Thank you.
So was that charismatic or what? What I loved about this conversation with Richard is that it breaks the illusion that charisma is reserved for the chosen few. The truth is that you don't have to be the loudest, you don't have to perform, you just have to show up fully, clearly, and with intention. Charisma is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more of you, the version that leads, connects, and lights up a room just by being. If this episode sparked something in you, go check out Richard's book, Charisma Unlocked. Keep walking like the star of your own movie, and I'll see you next week.